The massive crystal halls of the Galactic Academy of Xenobiology sparkled under three suns. Inside one of the floating lecture pods, Professor Blue's tentacles moved gracefully as he addressed his advanced xenobiology class. His color-shifting skin showed excitement as he prepared to announce their final assignment of the term. The classroom was filled with 30 students from across the galaxy. Some floated in anti-gravity bubbles, others sat on cushioned seats, and a few remained in their environmental tanks. They all watched their professor with their various sensing organs, waiting eagerly. "Your final assignment," Professor Blue announced, his translator converting his biochemical signals into standard galactic speech, "will test everything you've learned about biological adaptation and survival. Each group will study a newly discovered primitive world that recently joined the Galactic Federation." A wave of excitement passed through the class. New worlds were rare and fascinating. Most had already been studied and documented over the thousands of years of galactic exploration. In the back of the classroom, 4 friends from different solar systems gathered together. There was Red, a crystalline being who sparkled with inner light; Mist, a cloud-like creature who changed shape constantly; Shell, an arthropoid with beautiful iridescent armor; and Bright, a being of pure energy contained within a special field generator. "We should pick an easy one," Mist suggested, their form swirling with anxiety. "Our grade point averages can't handle a difficult project right now." Red accessed the database through their neural link. "Look at this one. Earth. It just joined the Federation 3 cycles ago. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They've barely achieved spaceflight. Should be simple enough." The others gathered around to look at the basic planetary data. Shell's antennae twitched as they noticed something odd. "Wait, why are there so many warning labels? Extreme caution, hazardous conditions, special protection required." "Probably just standard warnings for primitive worlds," Bright pulsed dismissively. "You know how careful the Federation is about everything. Remember when they labeled that gas giant dangerous just because it had mild acid storms?" Professor Blue floated over to their group, his tentacles curling with interest. "Ah, Earth? An interesting choice." His skin flickered with colors they'd never seen him display before. Was that concern? Amusement? "Are you sure you want to study that particular world?" "It's just a primitive planet," Professor Red said confidently. "The species only recently discovered faster than light travel. How challenging could it be?" The professor's skin rippled with what they now recognized as barely contained laughter. "Very well. Earth it is. But I suggest you begin your research immediately. You might find it more enlightening than you expect." As the professor moved away, the 4 friends began dividing up their research tasks. Red would study the planet's physical characteristics. Mist would analyze the atmosphere and climate. Shell would examine the biological aspects, and Bright would investigate the dominant species' culture and history. "Let's meet in the library pod after classes," Shell suggested. "I want to get started right away. Something about the professor's reaction makes me nervous." Later, in the library pod, they gathered around a holographic display of Earth. The blue-green planet spun slowly, looking deceptively peaceful. "This is weird," Red said, their crystalline form dimming slightly. "The gravity readings must be wrong. And these temperature variations, that can't be right." Mist swirled anxiously. "The atmosphere, it's full of corrosive elements. And the pressure. How could anything survive?" Shell's antennae were practically tied in knots. "The biological diversity readings are off the charts. The number of predator species alone is—" "Hey," Bright interrupted, their energy form pulsing rapidly. "Did you know they have something called extreme sports? I'm not sure what it means, but the warning labels are fascinating." The 4 friends looked at each other, their confidence from earlier quickly fading. What had seemed like an easy assignment was starting to look much more complicated. They had no idea that they were about to discover why Earth had earned its reputation as one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. As they dug deeper into their research, none of them noticed Professor Blue watching from the doorway, his skin rippling with all the colors of amused anticipation. These were among his brightest students, but they were about to learn one of the most important lessons in xenobiology. Never underestimate a species that evolved on a death world. The library pod's holographic displays filled with data as the four alien students dove deeper into their research. Red's crystalline form dimmed considerably as they processed Earth's basic planetary information. "This can't be right," Red said, running the numbers for the third time. The planet's surface temperature ranges from -50 to +50 degrees in their measurement system. That's a 100-degree variation. Most species would die from even half that range. Mist swirled nervously, their cloudy form condensing and expanding rapidly. The atmosphere is even worse. It's 21% oxygen, pure, corrosive oxygen, mixed with nitrogen and other gases. It should be toxic. Everything should be constantly burning. Maybe the instruments were broken when they took these readings, Shell suggested, their iridescent armor reflecting the shifting lights of the displays. "Let me check the biological data." Oh, their antennae drooped. The humans breathed this mixture. On purpose. They needed to live. Bright pulsed with disbelief. "That's impossible. Oxygen at that concentration would destroy cellular structures, unless..." Their energy form flickered thoughtfully, "unless they evolved with it." The four friends sat in stunned silence for a moment, considering the implications. They came from worlds where conditions were stable, predictable, and safe. The idea of life evolving in such a hostile environment seemed impossible. "There's more," Red continued, their crystal structure vibrating with anxiety. "The gravity is crushing. 9.8 meters per second squared. That's nearly double what most Federation species are comfortable with. The humans just walk around in it. All day. Every day." Mist expanded suddenly in shock. "They walk. In that gravity. How don't they just collapse into puddles?" "Their bodies are dense," Shell explained, reviewing the anatomical data. "Dense muscles, dense bones. They evolved to support themselves under all that weight. But that's not even the strangest part." They brought up a new hologram showing Earth's position in its solar system. "Look at their sun exposure." The others gathered closer, watching as the hologram demonstrated Earth's orbit around its yellow star. Bright's energy field crackled with surprise. "They're getting constant radiation from their sun. And they just live with it." "Not only do they live with it," Shell said, their voice trembling slightly, "they go out in it on purpose. Something called sunbathing. They expose themselves to radiation for entertainment." Red accessed another data stream, their crystal form pulsing with different colors as they processed the information. According to this, humans actually need some of that radiation to produce essential vitamins in their bodies. They get sick without it. Sick without radiation. Mist condensed into a tight ball of worry. "Everything we know about biology says that's backwards." Bright brought up some cultural files they'd been studying. "Look at this. They build special rooms to simulate their sun's radiation when they can't get enough of it naturally. And they build other rooms to simulate their crushing gravity when they're in space. They get uncomfortable when these conditions aren't present." Shell's antennae twitched rapidly as they processed more biological data. "Their healing factor is extraordinary too. They can recover from broken bones, torn muscles, even lost limbs to some extent. Their bodies just repair themselves." "I think," Red said slowly, their crystal structure vibrating at a frequency that indicated deep thought, "we might have made a mistake choosing Earth for our easy assignment." The four friends looked at each other, then back at the streams of data flowing through the holographic displays. What they'd thought would be a simple study of a primitive species was turning into something much more complex. "Should we ask Professor Blue for a different planet?" Mist suggested hopefully. "No," Bright pulsed firmly. "Think about it. If humans evolved to survive in these conditions, what else are they capable of? This could be the most interesting research project we've ever done." As if to emphasize their point, New data began scrolling across their displays. Information about Earth's weather patterns, natural disasters, and the countless ways the planet regularly tried to kill its inhabitants. The four students settled in for a long night of study, each privately wondering what other surprises Earth and its remarkable inhabitants had in store for them. Morning came to the Galactic Academy, but the four friends had barely noticed the passage of time. Their research pod was cluttered with half-eaten nutrition packs and dozens of hovering holographic displays showing Earth's various environmental systems. "I don't understand," Mist said, their cloudy form darkening like an approaching storm. "Why don't the humans just leave these dangerous areas?" They were watching footage of a coastal city preparing for something called a hurricane. Red's crystalline structure vibrated with confusion. They build their homes right next to active volcanoes, right on top of fault lines that regularly tear the ground apart. They even build cities below sea level. Speaking of seas, Shell clicked their mandibles nervously, bringing up a new display. 70% of their planet is covered in water. Liquid water. Not the safe, frozen kind most worlds have. And it's full of salt that corrodes everything it touches. Bright pulsed rapidly, their energy form flickering with excitement. But that's not even the strangest part. The humans go into these waters. For fun, they have something called surfing, where they ride on top of waves that could crush them to death. The group watched in horror as footage showed humans willingly entering the ocean, swimming in waters filled with dangerous creatures. Some humans were even diving deep below the surface with seemingly primitive breathing equipment. "Look at this," Shell said, pulling up more data. "They have these things called seasons. The entire planet's climate changes drastically several times per year. Plants die and regrow. Animals migrate thousands of miles. The temperature swings we saw earlier, those happen regularly." Mist condensed anxiously. "How do they survive winter? Everything freezes, and then summer comes and everything burns." "They adapted," Red said, displaying human clothing and shelter designs. "They build different houses for different climates. They make special clothes. They even learn to predict these weather patterns with surprising accuracy." Bright was scanning through disaster records. "There's more. Their planet has these things called tornadoes, spinning columns of air that destroy everything in their path, and earthquakes that shake entire cities to pieces, and tsunamis, giant waves that can wipe out coastal regions. Surely they evacuate the dangerous regions." Shell's antennae twitched hopefully. "No," Bright pulsed dimly. "They'd rebuild. In the same places. They create stronger buildings, better warning systems, but they stay. They adapt and continue living in these death zones." Red brought up population density maps. "Look at this region called Japan. It sits on multiple fault lines, has active volcanoes, regular earthquakes, tsunamis, and powerful storms. It's one of their most densely populated areas. They built one of their largest cities there." "I found something worse." Mist swirled anxiously. "They have these areas called Australia and Amazon. Almost every living thing there is deadly. Poisonous creatures, aggressive predators, toxic plants, and humans live there too." Shell was reviewing data about Earth's wildlife. "The predator situation is unprecedented. Most worlds have one or two apex predators that evolve to dominate their regions. Earth has dozens. Lions, tigers, bears, sharks, crocodiles, eagles, and humans somehow became the apex predator above all of them." "Not just that," Bright added, their energy field crackling with amazement. "They keep some of these predators as pets. They have something called zoos where they collect dangerous creatures to look at them. They study them up close." The four friends fell into stunned silence, watching various displays showing Earth's natural disasters, dangerous creatures, and extreme environments. Humans weren't just surviving in these conditions, they were thriving. "I think I understand now," Red said slowly, their crystal form glowing with realization. "Earth isn't just a death world because of any one thing. It's because everything there is trying to kill them, all the time. The humans didn't just adapt to one or two extreme conditions. They adapted to all of them. Shell finished, their armor reflecting the glow of the displays. And they're still adapting. Mist swirled thoughtfully. Maybe that's why the Federation marked Earth as extremely hazardous. Not because it's dangerous to humans, but because humans became dangerous by surviving it. Bright pulsed with understanding. And we haven't even started looking into their actual biology yet. The four students shared a moment of nervous anticipation. If this was just the environment humans lived in, what kind of creatures had such a world created? Shell stared at the holographic display of human anatomy, their antennae twitching wildly. This makes no sense. Their bones are inside their bodies. Inside, and they're filled with living tissue that makes blood cells. Forget the bones, Mist swirled frantically. Look at their skin. It's their first line of defense. But it's so thin. And it has holes in it. Millions of tiny holes that release water and salt to cool them down. They call it sweating. Red's crystalline form pulsed with confusion as they studied human metabolic data. They maintain a constant internal temperature of about 37 degrees. They burn energy constantly just to stay warm. If their temperature changes by even a few degrees, they can die. But that's what makes them so interesting. Bright flickered excitedly. They can adjust their temperature through exercise, sweating, and shivering. They're like walking furnaces. And look at this, they can survive extreme blood loss and still recover. The four friends had moved their research to one of the Academy's biological analysis labs. Holograms showing different aspects of human biology floated around them, each more bewildering than the last. Their healing abilities are extraordinary, Shell noted, bringing up medical records. Broken bones knit back together. Damaged organs repair themselves. They can even regrow parts of their liver. And their skin. Their antennae curled in disbelief. It just grows back. Mist condensed nervously. They're basically immortal then. No, Red answered, scanning through more data. But they're incredibly hard to kill. Look at their cardiovascular system. The backup nerve center in the heart itself. Multiple organs they can live without. Built-in pain management systems. They can even function with half their brain. Bright pulsed rapidly, displaying information about human digestive systems. You won't believe this, Bart. They can eat almost anything organic. Their stomach produces acid strong enough to dissolve metal, but their digestive tract has special protections against it. They have bacteria living inside them that help them digest food. Bacteria. Shell clicked in alarm. You mean they're full of other organisms? By choice. It gets better, Bright continued. They can eat parts of other creatures that would be deadly poison to most species. They call these things spices and seasonings. They eat them for pleasure. Red brought up more dietary information. Look at this list of what they can consume. Plants, animals, fungi, fermented foods. They can even eat certain kinds of clay to help with digestion. They turned poisonous plants and toxic bacteria into food through something called cooking. Their endurance is the most frightening part, Mist said, displaying physical performance data. They just keep going, long after most species would have collapsed from exhaustion. They can run for hours in the heat. They literally chase prey until it dies of exhaustion. Shell's armor rattled slightly. They're pursuit predators. But instead of being fast, they just never stop. They can track prey for days. And look at their arms. The hologram highlighted human shoulder joints. They can throw objects with deadly accuracy. They can hit running prey from a distance. Their brains are fascinating too, Bright added. They need sleep to function, but they can go days without it if they have to. And they can override nearly every natural survival instinct through something called willpower. The reproduction data is equally bizarre, Red noted. They can breed any time of the year. Their young take years to mature, but during that time, they learn and adapt to almost any environment. and they can reproduce in almost any climate on their planet. The four students fell silent, watching a simulation of human cellular regeneration. A small cut sealed itself, new skin growing to cover the wound. "We thought Earth was the Deathworld," Mist said quietly. "But the humans, they're perfect Deathworld organisms. Everything about them is designed for survival." "Not just survival," Shell added, their voice filled with awe. "Dominance. Look at their population growth, their adaptation to new environments, their ability to use tools. They're still evolving, still getting stronger. No wonder the Federation has special protocols for human interaction," Bright pulsed thoughtfully. "But we still haven't looked at their cultural development. What kind of society would creatures like this create?" Red's crystal structure glowed dimly. "Do we want to know? Everything we've learned so far has been terrifying." "We have to know," Shell said firmly. "For the project. And I'm starting to understand why Professor Blue found our choice so amusing." The four friends began pulling up historical and cultural data, none of them quite prepared for what they were about to discover about humanity's path to civilization. Bright's energy form flickered erratically as they processed the historical data. "This can't be correct. They fought wars, not just for resources or territory, but for ideas, for thousands of years." "Yes," Red confirmed, their crystalline structure dulled with disbelief. "And during these wars, they created new technologies at an incredible rate. Medical advances, transportation, weapons, communication, all driven by their conflicts." The four friends had relocated to a private study chamber after their discoveries about human biology had caused several other students to flee the library in terror. Now they were deep into human cultural and historical records. "Look at this," Mist swirled anxiously, displaying footage of various human activities. They climb frozen mountains without environmental suits. They jump out of flying machines for entertainment. They swim with predators. They run into burning buildings to save others. Shell's antennae curled in confusion. They have a whole category of activities called extreme sports where they deliberately put themselves in danger. They race vehicles at fatal speeds, dive from great heights, and fight each other for fun. That's not even the strangest part. Bright pulsed rapidly. They deliberately consume toxic substances that alter their mental states, something called alcohol and caffeine. They know these things are harmful, but they drink them anyway. Red brought up more cultural data. They create art about danger. They tell stories about facing death. They have countless myths about heroes who overcome impossible odds. They celebrate risk-taking. Their entertainment is fascinating, Shell noted, clicking through various human media. They watch simulated stories about disasters, monsters, and wars. They play games where they pretend to be in dangerous situations. They're obsessed with testing their limits. Mist condensed into a tight, worried ball. Their scientific advancement is equally reckless. They split atoms before they fully understood the consequences. They created artificial intelligence before establishing proper safeguards. They launched themselves into space using controlled explosions. Speaking of space, Bright flickered thoughtfully. Look at their early space program. They sent humans into orbit in capsules that had less computing power than our portable devices. They went to their moon in what was essentially a metal box with engines. The survival rate for early astronauts was surprisingly high. Red's crystal structure vibrated with amazement. Their approach to medicine is just as shocking. They discovered anesthesia by basically poisoning themselves. They tested vaccines by injecting themselves with diseases. Their first heart surgeries were done without modern medical technology. Their response to disasters is unique too, Shell added. When something terrible happens, earthquakes, floods, fires, humans often run toward the danger to help others. They have entire professions dedicated to risking their lives for strangers. Mist expanded suddenly. I found something about their military training. They have exercises where they deliberately deprive themselves of sleep and food, push their bodies to exhaustion, and simulate combat conditions. They call it making themselves stronger. Their entertainment venues are death traps. Bright noted, displaying images of human gatherings. Thousands of humans crowded together in enclosed spaces, watching sports or music performances. The noise levels alone would kill most species, and they call it fun. Red processed more data about human celebrations. They have festivals where they run from angry animals through city streets, competitions where they carry heavy weights up mountains, ceremonies where they walk on hot coals. They turn dangerous activities into traditions. Wait until you see this, Shell said, their armor reflecting the glow of a new hologram. They keep trying to break records. Fastest, highest, deepest, most extreme. They're constantly pushing their limits. When someone says something is impossible, they take it as a challenge. The four friends sat in stunned silence, surrounded by images and data about human culture. Everything they learned seemed to defy logic. A species that not only survived in extreme conditions, but actively sought them out. I think I understand now, Mist said quietly. They're not just adapted to their death world. They're addicted to challenge. Bored by safety. Exactly. Bright pulsed. Most species evolve to avoid danger. Humans evolved to overcome it. And then they made overcoming danger into an art form. We still have to present all this to the class, Red reminded them. How do we explain a species that treats mortal peril as entertainment? Shell's antennae twitched with determination. We show them everything. Let them see why Earth isn't just a death world. It's a training ground for one of the most resilient species in the galaxy. The main lecture hall of the Galactic Academy was packed. Word had spread about the strange findings of the four students, and many faculty members had joined the regular class to hear their presentation. Professor Blue floated at his desk, his skin shifting through amused colors. Red stood at the front, their crystalline form glowing with nervous energy. Shell, Mist, and Bright were next to them, each ready to present their part of the research. The holographic displays were prepared with their evidence. Fellow students, Red began, their voice slightly shaky. We chose Earth for our primitive world study thinking it would be simple. We were wrong. What we discovered was the most remarkable species any of us had ever encountered. The first hologram sprang to life, showing Earth's harsh conditions. Several students gasped at the extreme numbers. One faculty member loudly declared there must be an error in the data. There is no error. Shell stepped forward, their armor gleaming under the lecture hall lights. Humans live in these conditions every day. But that's not the most surprising part. They activated a sequence showing humans performing various activities. The hall fell silent as they watched humans diving into deep oceans, climbing sheer cliffs without safety equipment, running through deserts, and skiing down steep mountain slopes. A student in an environmental tank fainted. These are not survival situations, Mist explained, their cloudy forms swirling with excitement now. These are human recreational activities. They do these things for entertainment. For fun. More footage played. People bungee jumping from high platforms, wingsuit flying between mountains, free climbing skyscrapers, and racing vehicles at incredible speeds. The audience watched in horrified fascination. Their biology makes this possible, Bright pulsed, bringing up detailed anatomical displays. They can regulate their temperature, heal from severe injuries, and operate under extreme physical stress. They can eat almost anything, survive with minimal sleep, and adapt to nearly any environment. Professor Blue's skin flickered with approval as the presentation continued. The four friends showed evidence of human endurance, strength, and resilience. They explained how humans had turned their pursuit predator nature into sports, their love of danger into entertainment, and their drive to overcome challenges into technological advancement. But surely, one student interrupted, their crystalline form similar to Red's but duller, they avoid unnecessary risks. They must have strong safety protocols. Red activated another sequence of holograms. This is a human ceremony called a wedding. Notice how they celebrate with explosive devices called fireworks. This is a human sport called football. They deliberately crash into each other for points. And this, Red paused for effect, this is called hot chili pepper eating contest. Several students had to leave the room when they saw humans willingly consuming caustic substances for entertainment. Others watched in fascination as the presentation showed humans recovering from seemingly fatal injuries, adapting to extreme environments, and constantly pushing their limits. Their approach to space exploration alone defies belief. Shell continued, showing footage of early space missions. They reached their moon using computers less powerful than our personal devices. They sent probes beyond their solar system using technology we would consider primitive. They built a space station with multiple nations working together, while they were still fighting wars with each other. MIST expanded to display more data. They have a saying, "Hold my beer and watch this." It usually precedes an action that any rational species would consider suicidal. Yet they survive, learn, and do it again, but more extremely. Their cities, bright pulsed excitedly, are built in places we would never consider habitable. Look at this place called Phoenix. It's in a desert where temperatures regularly exceed 40 degrees. Or Moscow, where winter temperatures drop below -30. Millions of humans live in these places. The lecture hall had grown so quiet that even the environmental systems seemed loud. Professor Blue's skin was now showing colors of extreme satisfaction as his students presented their findings. In conclusion, Red said, their crystal form glowing brightly, "Earth is not classified as a death world because it's dangerous to humans. It's classified as a death world because it created humans." And humans, Red paused, looking around the stunned audience. Humans are what happens when a species doesn't just survive a death world. They conquer it. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of another student fainting in their gravity bubble. After the presentation ended, most of the audience filed out of the lecture hall in stunned silence. Some were still shaking, others were furiously taking notes, and a few looked like they might never sleep again. Only Professor Blue remained with the four friends, his tentacles waving gently as his skin shifted through various shades of satisfaction. "Professor," Mist swirled anxiously, "we didn't cause any permanent trauma to our classmates, did we?" Professor Blue's skin rippled with what they now recognized as laughter. No. Though I suspect the cafeteria will be serving extra portions of calming supplements today." He floated closer to them, his tentacles forming the academic gesture of approval. "There's something you haven't told us," Shell said, their antennae twitching with curiosity. "You knew what we would find when we chose Earth, didn't you?" Indeed, the professor's skin shifted to a deep shade of wisdom. "But you haven't yet discovered the most interesting part about Earth's classification as a death world." Red's crystalline structure brightened with interest. "What do you mean?" "We found so many reasons why it's classified that way." Professor Blue's tentacles formed a pattern they'd never seen before. "But did you ever wonder why the Federation keeps such detailed records of a primitive world? Why we have so much data about humans, despite them only recently joining the galactic community?" Bright's energy form pulsed with sudden realization. "The warning labels. They weren't for the humans, were they?" "Precisely." Professor Blue's skin flashed with approval. "Earth is classified as a death world not to protect humans from other worlds, but to protect other worlds from humans." "But they seem so friendly in the diplomatic records." Mist expanded in confusion. "They are friendly," the professor explained. "Almost impossibly so, given their capabilities. But consider, here is a species that treats activities we consider fatal as entertainment. Their children play games that would terrify our adults. Their athletes perform feats that seem to defy physics." Shell's armor reflected the changing colors of the professor's skin. "You mean they're holding back?" "In a way," Professor Blue continued. "Humans are naturally helpful and cooperative, but they're also incredibly adaptable and resourceful. The Federation learned early on that humans needed to be approached carefully, not because they're hostile, but because they're too helpful." Too helpful. Red vibrated with confusion. Imagine, the professor's skin shifted to a teaching pattern, a human visiting a low-gravity world. They try to help someone carry something heavy, not realizing their natural strength could launch the object into orbit. Or a human attempting to save someone from what they perceive as danger, not understanding that what's dangerous to them might be perfectly safe for another species. Understanding dawned on the four friends. Bright pulsed rapidly. That's why there are so many protocols about human interaction. Indeed, every Federation species has to undergo special training before working with humans. We have to learn to communicate clearly about our different capabilities. Humans, bless their resilient hearts, sometimes forget that not everyone evolved on a Deathworld. But Professor Mist swirled thoughtfully. If they're so powerful and capable, why did the Federation accept them at all? Aren't they dangerous? Professor Blue's skin shifted to a complex pattern of wisdom and amusement. That's the most remarkable thing about humans. Despite evolving on a world that should have made them aggressive and paranoid, they developed empathy, creativity, and an almost unstoppable drive to help others. They're one of the few species we've encountered that consistently puts the welfare of others above their own safety. Like those rescue workers we saw in the data. Shell clicked excitedly. Running into danger to save strangers. Exactly. The professor's tentacles waved in approval. Humans are classified as a Deathworld species not because we fear their aggression, but because we must protect them from their own helpful instincts, and occasionally protect ourselves from their well-meaning assistance. Red's crystal structure glowed with sudden insight. So our easy assignment was actually an advanced lesson in xenobiology and cultural understanding. Professor Blue finished, his skin showing patterns of pride. And you four have done an exceptional job. You've learned what many seasoned xenobiologists take years to understand. That the most remarkable thing about humans isn't their physical capabilities or their survival skills. It's their hearts, bright pulsed softly. Their giant, reckless, incredibly caring hearts. The professor agreed. Now, who would like to help me design next year's curriculum about human diplomatic protocols? I believe we need a whole new course just for that. The four friends looked at each other, then back at their professor, each remembering how they'd thought Earth would be an easy assignment. They had wanted to study a primitive world, and instead, they'd discovered something far more valuable. A species that had turned a Deathworld into a crucible for compassion.